All right. So uh, anyone following the saga of the mysteries of aliases and whatnot, um, I went I went for a stroll this morning, and for whatever reason, the name Rick came up when a person crossed my path. And the reason that I want to video journal about this is because he looked directly in my eyes, and I looked directly in his eyes, and I said, "Hi, Rick." And I couldn't even tell you why, but my thought was, as it was like an instantaneous, like as though I recognized him or something. And I recognized the guy from somewhere, but he has the guy who I spoke to. Again, uh here's my fingerprint. Because I've testified, I'm going to use the word testified many times, that I've never officially met the infamous Ricky Freeman, who I've heard so much about, through not so much about, but I've talked about the little sort of seeds of information that were planted in my head by my sister-in-law so very many years ago. And there were enough that I sort of formulated a persona of my sister-in-law's brother-in-law and her sister Michelle, um, not to be confused with me because my middle name's Michelle. Um, Michelle Gray sort of looks a lot like Cameron Diaz. If you like put along, because when I met Michelle Gray back when my first daughter was very young, and again, I only met Michelle Gray very few times. And every time that I met Michelle Gray, she had long, very long, uh, gray white hair. And when we were younger, I remember my sister-in-law Holly, younger as in let's see, 23, 43, 46, like 4 decades ago. Um, Michelle Gray had completely white hair. Was it a wig? I have no idea. I remember Holly telling me that, oh, well, uh, Michelle is got a condition where she prematurely has gray hair, but facially she looks exactly like Cameron Diaz. So there's a lot of jumping around here because there's a lot of aliases involved. I think so. It's hard for me to stay on like a linear thought, not realizing, not only even because of identity theft and emotional distress that I've been through because of these people. Um, but also because they have so many aliases and have jumped and moved around the country so much. Um, so when this guy went, as I passed him and I said, "Hi, Rick," I have no idea why that thought came into my mind. That was at the end of my as I was coming back to my apartment. And as I was going out from my apartment, there was a guy who reminded me of um, Dave Cateras, which is somebody I told him that I graduated because when I saw him, he looked at me, I looked at him, and I said, sorry, you remind me of someone I graduated from high school with. You could be a son, because there was an obvious age difference. Now, could that have been Dave Gutierrez with a facelift and a little bit of height shortening because of age? No doubt in my mind that that's a that it, is. Um, However, I don't know for certain. He just kind of acted like he didn't like me acknowledging. And I'm certain that then there was a play on, oh, she says that to everybody, because he was standing there with what who looked like the maintenance guy here on the apartment staff. But the because the strategy of all these aliased people, when I recognize, is always, they come back, oh, that's that crazy bitch in unit 303. Just don't pay any attention to her. She's a mental health patient, blah, 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 blah. So as I was coming back, and the other guy, and I said, hi, Rick. I wanted to make certain that I went public on video documentation that it, that was like a guess that and oddly enough, again, only from the facial front, it was it was like looking at a male me. But then from the side, his nose is different, and his actual profile might be different. But to say, to keep straight and honest my testimony, that I have not, even then, I was just kind of playing on, not even playing, because it wasn't, it was I can't even explain. It was conscious but not conscious. It was like a and I think it's might be because I've been trying to I've been spending conscious time trying to zero in on the face that I saw at or the person that I saw at not Otter Point, at what the heck is that, Flying Point Park, many years ago, four decades ago, because our children were very young then, my first daughter. And it was, and I've told this story as in true story of mine, of my own experience. Um, and I've talked a little bit about here and there. I don't know how much I've put in video documentation about the fact that my sister-in-law Holly, a lot of times when I would go over to visit, she would say, "Oh, Dawn, Rick just left." Now, see, that might have been an implication tactic. I don't know. I don't know, because we're talking 4 decades ago, or let's see, or close to 4 decades ago, at a time when I was like so very naive and clueless and easily taken advantage of. So I've been spending conscious time uh, trying to zero in on the one, and there might have been a second time that I saw Rick, and that was but I just really don't think so. I don't think he ever accompanied Michelle to. No, that was Dylan. It was her second husband. Um and I always get the son and the father's name mixed up, Dylan and Dalton. Um but Michelle's second husband of the person who I know as Michelle Gray. Because I don't know how many other husbands or lives she's lived or aliases she's had. Um, According to my own personal experience with the persona and body, physical being of which I know as Michelle Gray. Um, and so Rick Freeman, there was only one time, and that was at Flying Point Park when we were having a picnic, and Holly said to me, "Dawn, there's Rick." And whenever she said that to me, I would always be confused and like, what's that supposed to mean to me? But I never asked. I would say, I'm sure there was a very quizzical look on my face. I don't know if I ever responded like, so what are you telling me for, Holly? Um, and so I've been spending conscious time trying to zero in on that physical being that Holly pointed to at Flying Point Park that day. And then comes the switcheroo, he's you. Because then comes the implication of um, and this would have been after a number of years after my FBI badge was stolen out of my 1964 and a half Mustang. Um, as in at least 6 years before or after, rather. Actually, more than that, because Jen would have been at Flying Point Park picnic that day. My first daughter would have been like 5 years old. Anyway, so my suspicion is, and I'm alleging that Michelle and Rick Gray possibly were also a part of the kidnapping of my son, the or trafficking of my biological son, biological twin of my biological daughter Jennifer Johnson. Um, but I've been spending conscious time zeroing in on my memory as far as trying to, because the physical being who Holly pointed to at Flying Point Park all those years ago, um, was, it looked like a very, very thin, was wearing a hoodie, um, which a lot of people wear hoodies. I know that there's a whole, mm, what these people have gotten away with. It's and have used me as a, here's a huge bag, could you please carry it for us? Oh, it is our guilt of you, Dawn, but could you just, you know, um so to try and see if there was, if I could, and I really can't. But there are people, men who come in my path who I frequently am like, well, is that him? To the point of where, and a lot of them don't even look anything alike. It's just that physical image that I have. And that physical image of the person Holly pointed to, I couldn't even tell you if it was a guy or a male or a female, because the physical being was standing off, I would say, I don't know, probably a quarter of a block away, maybe. And I couldn't see. So, like, the person looked like they were about this big, is probably a better um, whoever she pointed to, the distance from me, the person looked like they were about this big. So to put that in perspective, use the word perspective as a as a distance reference. Um, so I couldn't tell you what the person looked like. And I had never been again. So this is the purpose of me video documenting right now, is because the person who I saw just not a few hour and a half, 2 hours ago, and said, Rick, that's the person who I was thinking of. And so I wonder if it's very possible if I have now non met the infamous Ricky Freeman, or at least who was pointed out to me all those years ago at Flying Point Park by Holly Henderson, who Ricky Freeman was. But there's no way for me to know, because at this point I really am starting to wonder if Ricky Freeman is one of those um, uh, created personas where, like, they couldn't pin any one thing onto him because there's so many of him. Uh, 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 in other words, possibly the same thing was done to him as done to me. However, he being his physical being a guilty physical being, and my physical being an innocent. So it's like the same but opposite. So it's kind of um, mind bending a little bit. So I just wanted to go on video documentation as far as me calling that guy Rick, and actually thinking and wondering. It might even have been a sort of a subconscious, that physical persona might have been, I don't know. I'm trying to think of what, what could have gave me some kind of inkling, that because as I was approaching, I wasn't thinking about Ricky Freeman. Um, but the fact that the guy who, as I was leaving to go on my stroll, um, there's a lot of Harford County politics and activity that there's a lot of Harford County presence uh, in the area again, and so I acknowledge it when I see it, and I don't need to justify why. Um, if I wasn't aware of so much corrupt activity going on around me all the time, no matter where I am. Um, it probably wouldn't be as important to acknowledge what I see when I see it, or likenesses, or um, but I don't want somebody to get away with, even though Dave Kateras I considered a friend, and wouldn't really find a reason for Dave Kateras to be an like of interest in my investigations of my own life and my own experiences, um until I start to think about um the social, what they called a social experiment, and what I'm realizing may have been uh, a much more practiced thing, uh, of giving guilty people aliases and sending them off to schools with much younger people. And in fact, because I was just saying that there might be somebody called Dawn Henderson attending um, um, one of the high schools in the area, or some other high school, or and that's a little bit irritating to me. Actually, it's a lot irritating because I don't like being implicated as having an alias, or being willing to go back to school, back to high school, and I don't like the fact that someone uh, within the whole scheme of time warping and all that, uh, I don't like the thought of someone latching on to my identity attending high school under my in my name, and doing the same thing that was done to me but done in my name this go round. um and that's obviously because I don't see that as an ethical response to sealing of a criminal's uh, criminal records. And I don't like being implicated in other people's activities via my name. And since I'm on that topic, I'm going to talk about the Dawn Henderson, who was a a women's basketball coach at Michigan State, and I've researched it again a little bit, um, and I can't find the name. And I'm trying to remember the um, when I originally found the information, because I thought, gosh, that's interesting. There was a Dawn Henderson who was a coach at Michigan State of the uh, of the women's basketball team. Now comes Gene F. Henderson II's presence in again, and I can hear him uh, uh, splicing and turning and adjusting um, my testimony. Um, but however, I recently realized the full implications of that. And that is that if that basketball coach from all those years ago, because it was like back in, I can't remember exactly when I came across the story. But it was like in the 80s that the coaches, there was a Don Henderson who was a coach, 80s or 90s, I can't remember, because I really didn't pay that much attention to it. I just thought it was like, at the time that I saw the story, I was just like, oh wow, look, there was a um a basketball coach at Michigan State called named Don Henderson, and I thought, that's interesting. It was while I was at Applebee's. It was when I was working at Applebee's in Bel Air, Maryland. Because um and that was in 2005. And now all these years later, just within the last few days, I started to realize the full implication of what I not something of something else that I might have been coming up against that I didn't realize because of the same name, either purposefully chosen by the basketball coach, because believe me, I realize that a lot of coaches and teachers have aliases also. By now I realize that. The and so if that Don Henderson basketball coach at Michigan State was guilty of some kind of uh mis uh gross misuse of power of position, then uh, those the victims or whoever might have been involved in any kind of accusations of a Michigan State University coach named Dawn Henderson, women's basketball coach, that any members of that team who were mistreated by Dawn Henderson basketball coach, which this physical being has never been a coach of anything. This one, it, um, that those, if there were any, and I'm just working through realizing some other things that uh, where if there were any victims of Dawn Henderson basketball coach at Michigan State, and those victims were redirected, oh gosh, that's Dawn Henderson over there, um, then that might be another line of this really upsetting and sort of condition of not understanding why this group of people over here or this person is reacting to me in a way that it makes no sense to me, because I never met this person, I never did anything to this person. So the whole what those criminals or even I don't know if federal witnesses are given aliases. In the aliases don't work, in other words, no matter what side of the coin you're on. If you're a criminal and you've gone to and attended high school in a much older age, and they said, oh gosh, we're going to seal their records and we're going to give them an alias, and then he's not really 70 years old, he's 33, And then we're going to send them over to high school with all these 18-year-olds. Um, it, it doesn't work. It doesn't work because it creates a great big freaking mess of implications on the innocent, and and charges that, I'm constantly under charge of somebody coming at me trying, like, and I'm like, look, I don't know where you're coming from, but you better back off from me because I know my innocence, okay? I know my level of innocence. I know my level of integrity. And I know that I'm one of the only chronologically aged adults that I know of who's never had an alias. So back off me. Um, um, and to realize then again, yet another area of implications or illegitimate charges coming at me from something that I had absolutely nothing to do with. It's just the same name thing. And it might be a same name thing because the person purposefully was assigned, knowing or chose the name of an innocent person so they wouldn't have to blah, 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 blah. So then the innocent person is sitting in their apartment or homeless for 12 years, 14 years, and lost custody of her own biological children, wondering what the heck is going on. With that, I'm going to end my journal my video documentation. Oh, and I should say that me sharing this information is not only sharing my experience, but again, my a goal is to empower and inform anyone else who has uh, it as soon as I say something, then the guilty people, I can see their presences coming in. Oh well, I'm guilty. I've been a victim of identity theft. No, you relinquished your identity or your previous name. That's different from being a victim of identity theft. Okay. Uh, so with that, I'm gonna end my documentation video.